Good evening, guys. It is Monday, February 24th, 2025. This is Bathrobe Business. I'm Georgie Oganov. I don't have any decaf coffee or nothing tonight, but I still have the news. So let's jump into it. Start of a new week. Major announcement from the Trump administration that's going to probably play a major role here within the next week or so. The Trump tariffs will go into effect with the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So a 25% tariff is due to go into effect with all products coming from Mexico and Canada starting March 3rd. So, kind of a big deal, seeing as how Mexico is the United States' biggest trading partner. It actually surpassed China last year. Canada, major trading partner. We are their major trading partner. Obviously, we're bigger to them than they are to us, but still a lot of stuff coming from Canada. I believe up to 40% of the lumber, 30 to 40% of lumber in the United States, specifically for construction, comes from Canada. So not a small amount of increase that will probably affect home building and home construction. We talked about that last week. With Donald Trump, you never know, because it could be just a negotiating tactic, and at the very last minute, he could pull the rug out. That's pretty much what happened last time. He said that tariffs are going to go into effect, and then at the very last minute, he canceled them. But if they do go into effect, major economic uncertainty. It's definitely going to have a major role in the markets. Now, interestingly enough, let me share real quick the gold price. So gold is reacting positive to, depending on your perspective, but gold is up. So let me share that screen. 1 second. Okay. Gold price. So currently sitting in 29.53. Actually, while I was prepping for this video, it was at 29.63. So once again, hitting new highs and just barely underneath that $3,000 mark. It's interesting that $3,000 mark seems to be a real ceiling. It can't seem to break it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just very interesting that it's broken through other ceilings much quicker than it has with the $3,000 mark here. It's previously, every time it was coming up against the ceiling, it would just explode out. But 3,000 does seem to be a pretty big threshold. Interestingly enough, I will report on crypto really quick. So gold has continued its march up. Crypto, on the other hand, has kind of started to slide back down. So Bitcoin is down below 100,000, and it's continuing a march down towards 90,000. I'm not a crypto guy. I don't really believe in the product too much, so I don't invest in it. But it's been on a steady decline pretty much since the beginning of February. So over here, according to this chart, January 29th was really the last time Bitcoin hit a new high of 105 and has since just continued a steady march down. It's currently sitting at 92,000. Interestingly enough, despite what they say with Bitcoin being a hedge against inflation, Bitcoin very much reacts to what happens in the market. If the market has a big day where it falls, Bitcoin has a big day where it falls. So it makes sense that economic tension will actually drive Bitcoin down, not up. Next story I want to talk about is, well, let's save that. Well, I guess I will mention it now. So in response with Trump's tariffs, he is teasing new economic development with Russia. Now, I'm not one of those guys that is like, oh, Trump is a Russian agent. They fooled me with that during 2016. I very much fell for that. I don't believe that anymore. I think this is entirely just monetary of what makes sense for trade and what doesn't. Interesting thing about this article is it's talking about relations with Russia possibly opening back up. Now, that is something that could definitely stem inflation, and it's definitely something that could, in fact, drive the price of gold down. If the Ukraine war ends and gold does not start dropping in price astronomically, buy every single ounce of gold you can, because if that doesn't get it to fall, nothing will. And as we've talked about on this channel, inflation is kind of baked into the market. Inflation is going to happen one way or another. And if that doesn't drive it down, you can guarantee that it's going to continue. But in this article, it talks about that if trade with Russia normalizes, if the war ends and economic development resumes, we could see major moves towards minerals, metallurgy, and chemicals. That's not surprising. Those are some of Russia's greatest exports. Petroleum as well, obviously, but that's more for Europe. We don't really get too much of the petroleum imported here into the United States. But it will affect global prices of oil, of course. Gasoline, oil definitely skyrocketed when the Ukrainian war started, so it would help energy costs. But overall, for the United States, the biggest benefit would be minerals. Specifically, we're talking about batteries, we're talking about data centers, we're talking about all those fancy new electronics that are going to come in with the rise of AI. So it's definitely going to be a pretty powerful strategic partner. In reference to more trade as well, trade and tariffs, Trump takes a victory lap on Apple's $500 billion U.S. investment. So this is it's a good story. And I think the story is 100% correct that it's kind of a nonsense story. So the story talks about how Apple is planning a major global investment in the United States, $500 billion, potentially 20,000 new jobs, et cetera, et cetera. If you actually start parsing through the data and what this article talks about, it's really elaborating on the programs that already exist. So let's talk about how Apple is going to build an AI center in Texas. Well, Apple already has an AI center in Texas. We reported here last year how Apple is moving its AI program from California into Texas. And it's not a large group at all. In fact, it was a little surprising that their group was so small. I think it was just numbering in the dozens. And that was everyone that was behind AI at Apple. So this is going to be kind of a nonsense story. What's most interesting about this is that these kinds of stories, I think, are going to become more and more prevalent as DEI is kind of out, but America First starts coming in. So don't be surprised if a lot of corporations start virtue signaling towards America First policies. A lot of people say they're kissing Trump's ass. I think that's kind of a cynical view. I think in reality, it's just going to be kissing the ass of the American people, trying to promote that you're an America First company when you're really not. I mean, Apple is 100% manufactured overseas. I believe most of it is in China. There's some development that happens in India, but nothing for Apple is ever manufactured in the United States. And that's not going to change. And again, we've talked on this channel why that is as well, because of supply chains, because of the infrastructure that China can build out. America just does not have the capabilities to do. But at the end of the day, this is just a virtue signal. So keep your eyes out for stories like this. There's going to be a lot more of them. Next story I'm going to talk about, kind of a depressing one. So we've talked about how great retail has been, how great spending has been, but this kind of pokes a major hole in that argument. So in major marketplace news, about 70%, 70% of US GDP is just from consumer spending. But what's terrifying about this article is that about 10% of the America making 250,000 or more is now making up about half of consumer spending in the United States. So 10% of America's population is spending for half of the US population. That's pretty bad because that means the most affluent are actually spending most of the money, and those below that line are just struggling to get by. That's pretty disheartening when it comes to income inequality. That's not a small thing to look at, especially since we're going into a very tumultuous climate. Now, I would also argue that oftentimes these tumultuous climates don't necessarily, well, of course they hurt the middle and lower class, but they often bring down upper classes drastically. And a lot of times these upper middle class families that are making 250,000 or more are actually hurt by it just as much. I keep talking on this channel how we need a realignment because we need higher interest rates. Higher interest rates would cure a lot of these issues. It's the medicine that the economy needs. But until that goes into effect, we're going to see a major income inequality in the United States between the two of those making more than 250,000 and those making less. Next story, let's talk about AI. So NVIDIA's H2O chips orders jump in as Chinese firms adopt DeepSeek AI models. So this is a very interesting story because AI is starting to boom in China. What's most interesting is, remember, AI chips in China are kind of banned from, well, the United States has banned sale of high-end AI chips into China. But DeepSeek doesn't use the most high-end AI chips. These H2O chips are ones that NVIDIA can legally sell into China. And it looks like, indeed, the rumors are true. DeepSeek doesn't need your highest end chips. They can make do with less because these orders are coming in as more and more firms are partnering with DeepSeek and more companies are purchasing their chips in order to grow their AI capabilities. Now, this is coupled with a second story that Donald Trump is planning further restrictions to cut off some of these H2O shipments as well. That hasn't been confirmed, but that is the rumor that Trump wants to tighten down and clamp down even more from where Biden was in regards to AI and chips. but that hasn't happened yet. So that makes sense why there's going to be a major shopping spree. I would say this makes NVIDIA definitely a buy for the next quarter. I don't think that this is going to go unnoticed. This is definitely going to be a major boost to their stock price and to their minimum orders, especially with the potential of more cutoffs and regulations coming for Donald Trump. These companies need to buy up as many chips as they possibly can before it happens. There are other means as well. You'll actually notice there's when those bans with China went into effect, all of a sudden Singapore doubled and tripled their order of AI chips for some reason. So there's always back-end deals that happen. There's always companies that buy chips in one country and then ship them to another. Interestingly enough, I remember when the economic sanctions went in against Russia, all of a sudden the exports of BMWs and Mercedes to Russia completely ceased, right? There's a lockdown. They can't sell it into it. But for some reason, shipments to Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia all doubled and tripled. Strangely enough, none of those countries have issues with trading with Russia. So there's always back-end deals with happen. So even if this does go into effect, China will still find a way of getting these chips. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to do it the old-fashioned way, just directly, as quickly as they can, and as efficiently as they can, while those embargoes have not been put in place yet. Last story I want to cover, more just an interesting story. So this is where college-educated Americans are moving. So this isn't so much a story of economics as it is a story of demographics and of narratives. So in 2023, the majority of college graduates moved to these following areas, from 1% all the way to 5%. The leader of the pack was surprisingly New York, followed by DC, and then Dallas was in third place. Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Chicago came in shortly after, followed by Denver, Boston, and San Francisco. Why I think this is an interesting story. Despite all the narratives we hear of, New York's dead, Los Angeles is dead, East Coast is dead, West Coast is dead, argument I actually came to believe. The data just doesn't show it. Despite the fact that there's all this talk about everybody's moving out of the big cities, everybody's leaving the big cities that are inefficient and costly, data shows quite the opposite. So don't always believe the narrative, look at the data, and that's pretty much it. That's just what I wanted to leave you guys with. I hope you guys have a productive Tuesday, and I'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Bye.